Take a look at the definitions I provide here concerning mass communication. Mass communication, do we still remember in the very beginning I mentioned the difference between communication and mass communication? What is the difference between these two concepts, as I mentioned, or what are the differences, if you can find many of them? Yeah, basically it's mass. Communication, but in the most general term, communication can be on a very small scale, such as interpersonal scale. We can make communication happen between two people. We can have a communication process as you and I make a small conversation between each other. But mass communication concerns communication on a very massive scale, and most often based on modern technologies, especially based on modern technologies such as satellite TV, cable TV, radio, internet, social media, so on. So let's take a look at the definitions I offer here concerning mass communication. Mass communication is a communication from one person or group of persons through transmitting device to a larger audience or market. The first definition provided by Biaggi already captured what I mentioned previously. Transmitting information, transmitting content of thoughts, content of idea from a small group, one person or a small group, to a larger, much, much larger scaled audience. Biaggi also mentioned market. Most likely what he has in mind is mass communication saturated, located in the background of Western highly advanced forms of capitalism. And the second definition provided by Janowitz, take a look, it's much longer and includes more concepts, more elements in the process of communication. Mass communications comprise the institutions and techniques. Institution, we mentioned, institution. Especially in terms of mass communication, we are not looking at the so-called small-scale interpersonal communication any longer. Our attention is always on the mass-scaled groups of people, especially in the forms of organization, modern forms of organizations, institutions such as broadcasting companies, media companies, propaganda departments of governments, institutions, and the techniques by which specialized groups employ technological devices such as press, radio, film, and so forth to disseminate symbolic content and to a large, heterogeneous, and widely dispersed audience. At the receiver's end, it should be large-scaled. For the sender's end, remember last time we mentioned the senders, receivers, right? These are the elements, the components of the process of communication. For the sender's end, related to mass communication, it might be for a small group of people. We can imagine such a situation where one social media influencer or a couple of them shooting videos, making online contents, and deliver such contents to a wider, much larger audience. And symbolic content. Symbolic, what does symbolic mean? Disseminate symbolic content. Symbolic presumably generates, has some ideas, some philosophical, linguistic ideas in mind when he came up with the definition of mass communication. Symbols. We are using all sorts of symbols in the process of communication. This idea of symbolism, or the significance of symbol in communication, in the formation of human ideas and spreading of human ideas, has a lot to do with the linguists and the philosophers in the second half of the 20th century, the so-called scholars, professors and scholars in the field of semiotics. The so-called semiotic, this word means the study of symbols, especially in terms of human communication. And the third one, take a look, it's Stanley's definition of mass communication in our textbook. Mass communication is the process of creating shared meaning between the mass media and their audience. The shorter, remember last time I mentioned, the shorter the definition is, the more general it sounds, and the more we need to put in order to unpack such a definition. Stanley's definition, of course, uses simple language, describes most common ideas, common concepts in the communication. But remember the key word in Stanley's definition, he mentioned the shared meanings. Remember, communication, mass communication, doesn't matter. They always involve interaction between human beings, sharing meanings between each other, sending message, sending information forward and backward, whether in a linear model of communication or in a circular, the so-called cyclical model of communication. It's always about sending back and forth information, or we might as well call it sharing information in a more kindly, friendly sense. Okay, so much for these definitions.